Good morning! Karie Lee here from the Sacred Cedars Wilderness School, coming live to you from Wales. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about was a little bit about on episode 8, last episode, and that was about, you see Adam going out for a hike into the back part of his site, and Adam and I have very similar sites, and mine was next door, and I too was trying to get to this river that he found. And I too was trying to get to that same river on day 47, which I thought was very interesting that we had the same thing in mind of like, we need to explore into the backcountry. And I knew about this river, and I knew that if I could get there, there's probably going to be an abundance of fish there. I tried to get there on day number 2, but I was sick with the flu. I didn't get very far. I was carrying a huge camera, and for some reason I had the first aid kit, and I misunderstood all the rules. I had this huge pack on me. I was so exhausted by half a mile. I had to turn around and come back. Didn't work. So I just thought it was interesting that we both had the same thought in mind, pretty much really close to the same time. I tried 3 times to get there. Never did make it, but I did see it from the helicopter when I came out. When I flew in, it looked like it was about 2 miles. When I flew out, it looked like 5 miles. Just saying, who knows how far it really was, but I was pretty hunkered down tired. So on the day that you see me shooting a squirrel with the arrow that bounced back, that was the day I was actually trying to get to that stream. It's a long journey, but I'm actually glad they showed that scene because it was hilarious. The squirrel was not that far up the tree. It was sitting on a branch 10, 15 feet away. I took my shot, bing, the arrow hit the tree, bing, bounced right back in front of my feet. And I'm like, wow, how perfect is that? Thank you. I picked up the arrow and I tried the shot again because it was so fun. Shot the arrow again, and obviously I missed it and went way past the tree. And it took me over 20 minutes to find that arrow. I did find it, but that also put me way behind as far as my original mission was to get to this stream, and it really delayed my journey a lot more. The days are so short, you don't have a lot of time to waste. So when you're out hunting for an arrow, it's like, oh my God. I could lose it, I could just give it up, but you don't really want to give up your arrows too. So that was a really fun scene for a moment, but it was also really aggravating that I had to take that time. The next thing is the windstorm. I'm so glad they showed this windstorm. It didn't quite happen on the time that they showed it, but I talked to the other participants and they all experienced the same storm. It lasted for 3 days. And from my memory, it was 3 days before the full moon, which clued me into what was going to happen in the future 3 days before the full moon. So I predicted weather a month in advance from when it actually happened. And we'll have to stay tuned to see what actually happens. Just saying. But that windstorm was cold, blistery, and coming from the south or southeast. Usually the wind would come from the west and go right over my shelter. But when it flipped around, we were getting those cold winds coming off of Greenland. And you know how icy cold Greenland can be, right? So that wind was coming in and coming right into the front of my shelter, and I did not have my front wall done. I didn't really need the front wall so much because it wasn't that cold, and I was protected from the wind, but then it flipped, and then it was icy dang cold. I'm like, okay, I got to work on this front shelter. I got to work on this front wall now. That was my thought with that windstorm coming in. I'm back from Wales and into my homeland in northern Idaho. So as you can see, it's a little windy here. And speaking of wind, I just wanted to come back to the part about my shelter. Now, so far on the show, you're just really not seeing a whole lot of my shelter. You're seeing the front, which is pretty open. It's got half a wall built, but you're not seeing all the nice sod on top of my roof, which is kind of a shame because it really was sealed up pretty tight, just except for the top half of my wall, which I do get fixed eventually. So it's kind of a bummer because I was really proud of that part, but you'll see it soon. I also want to come back around to the story of where I shot that squirrel and missed, and that the arrow bounced off the tree and came back. That happened because I'm using rubber blunts on the tips of my arrows. Now, I've never used rubber blunts before. I've always used judo points for small game, and at the last minute I was convinced, like, yeah, take a rubber blunt. I will never do that again. In fact, I don't think I'll ever shoot with rubber blunts. That was the second time. Well, the first time I shot the squirrel very early on in episode 3 or 5, I can't remember. And all I did was stun the squirrel. And there again, I was actually shot the squirrel. It bounced off the tree, it came back. That was the only time I appreciated having a rubber blunt because it came back to my feet. But I don't think I'll ever hunt with them ever. Now, talking about my shelter, in fact, when the snow came, that very first snow, they show my site coming from the west, which is kind of cool because if you look into the picture of the snow, you can see a little black spot. That is my shelter, and you can see how far up the hill I am, about 2/3 up the hill from the river, but down in this ravine. And this picture from this angle of my site, you can really see that I am protected in all 3 sides, from above, the west, and the east. And then underneath, I have all those willow trees and alder trees coming up from the river. So that was brilliant. I really liked that shot. Now, my conversation about miscarriage. Now, that was a pretty big night for me. This conversation all had to do around rites of passage. So there was a big story I was telling, and they shared the part about the miscarriage, which was right in the middle of my story. And what I'd been doing is, just for pure fun, I was counting down the days. So every morning I had to say, oh, this is day number 24, this is day number 25, blah, blah, blah. And around day 37, I started making up stories about each little number, some kind of little factoid. Some of it's true, some I made up. Day 37, my favorite number, it was a prime number, blah, blah, blah. But day 52 is a good number because, one, it's the number of cards in the deck of cards, but it's 4 cycles of 13 years that a woman goes through. So the first 13 years is your childhood. The second 13 years is adolescence. And then you have young adulthood, and then you have older adulthood. And so at 52 is a number that a lot of indigenous cultures mark as your time to go into elderhood or grandmotherhood. So when I turned 52, I was in Costa Rica and had my rites of passage. I actually cried the whole time. I cried because I was not ready. I was like, I'm not that old. I don't feel that old. I'm not ready to step into grandmotherhood or elderhood for that matter. And so it was really emotional for me, and it was a nice ceremony, but I resisted it. I just totally resisted coming into that part of my adulthood. So the story about my miscarriage, that was really my rites of passage into motherhood. And I got a lot of very, very dear messages on social media, and thank you. I really appreciate the concern, and I just have to say that I do not grieve my son who's in the spirit world. I dealt with that grievance very early on, and it was really helpful. And I realized that instead of spending 18, 20 years raising a child, I was able to step into who I am and what I'm here on this earth to do. On the other hand, I believe that those loved ones that leave you in life are there with you always. If you have ever lost a loved one, you may have had this experience of feeling a presence of them around you at a certain point of time. And I feel my presence of my son around me at different times throughout my life. And I know that he's there for me. He's watching over me, and maybe he's my guardian angel, I don't know. But I don't grieve his loss because I feel that presence of him with me all the time. So thank you for all those grievances, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sorry for you women who have experienced the same thing. It's tough. It's not easy. It is tough. And just want to say thank you, and my prayers out for you who have gone through the same thing. And just know. So the other part of that story was towards the end. I was talking about to know how to die is to know how to live, which is really came from a dream that I had that night. So there was a little bit of cross editing, and it made it look like the death and rebirth all has to do with the rites of passage. Didn't necessarily have to do with the death of my son and the miscarriage, but it was this overall conversation I was having about rites of passage. So the message that came out of that dream was to know how to die is to know how to live. In other words, it seems a little backwards. I think I said, at some point I said, to know how to live is to know how to die. But it was really the other way around. If you can accept death and be okay with it and be ready to die in a good way, not saying you always have a choice, you might be in a car accident. That's not really what I'm talking about. If you do your personal work, you may be in a place where you're not afraid to die. You don't want it to happen, but it may happen at some point. It's going to happen at some point. So it was more about dying in a good way so that you can be free and to live in a good way. And that was really what that statement was about. Little out of context, but I just want to share that with you because there was really a huge meaning in those words. And like I said, it came from this very, very profound dream that I had that night of day 52 to day 53. So out of this profound dream that I had, the first point about being life and death, the second part was about that message that came out of that dream went something like this. To be proud of who you are, to be proud of what you've done so far, to be humble about it, and to practice the art of humility. So when I got up and got dressed, I imagined myself putting on different clothes, and I said, I am proud of who I am. I am proud of what I've done so far. I am humble about it, and I'm So my song, the soul song. This is a song that my friend Hillary wrote, and I love this song. And I asked her to write me this soul song so that when times got tough, I would remember why I was there and who I was. Because I know I can wander around and like kind of lose yourself, like, why am I here and what am I doing here? I could go home and have a nice warm bed and food served to me on a plate. Well, maybe not at home, but you know what I mean. But I sang this song a lot. I sang it a lot and I loved the song. It's a beautiful song. I hummed it all the time. And it just really helped me ground out. It helped me to be in my place, and I could just sing it and sing it. The vocables, the hey and a hey part, the vocables just had a vibration. It was just so melodic. It's just kind of like dancing on the wind. That's what I'm feeling right now. And I just really appreciated that song. And I just love that they added the drum beat to it, because that song was meant to be sung with a drum. So that was brilliant editing, I just have to say, that they did that for me. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I loved it. So I also wanted to talk about the split fingers. Now that is painful, and it happened pretty early on. First finger happened on was right here, right on that edge. And that sometimes happens. We all get little split fingers, but these were deep. Like, I was amazed how deep that they could be and not bleed. It was gross. So the first one was on this finger. Just when this one heals, it took forever and ever and ever to heal. And once that one healed, then I got another one on my thumb on the side, as you can see in the picture. And it was deep as well. I went just as deep. It's like, oh, come on, please, please, please. And then shortly after that, and maybe even at the time they were showing my fingers, I also had a split right in the middle of my thumb pad. That was painful because I needed these 3 fingers to do trapping line in order to twist the line right there and right here, side of the fingers, the thumb pads. It was horrible and super painful, and especially when it's cold, you gotta take your hands out of the mitts and work really fast. And I would try to use different parts of my fingers, and at the same time I was afraid of getting them infected. So at night I would wash my hands in the black spruce tea that I made because black spruce is antiseptic. So this would clean my hands and make sure they didn't get infected. Of course, we do have a first aid kit, but that first aid kit, the fingertip band-aids, I think there was like 2 of them in the whole pack. And I thought, well, I could use these if these got really, really bad. I mean, they are really, really bad. But at the same time, like, what if I cut myself and I really, really need a band-aid and I don't have them? So I was trying not to use them. And to be honest, how long is a band-aid gonna stay on your finger? I mean, these were split for weeks. It wasn't just a cut you got for the day and it healed up in a couple of days. They lasted for probably 3 weeks each, maybe even longer. That was painful. That was definitely painful. And when it's cold like that, I was definitely getting tired of setting traps. And I could only do like 5 a day because they take a while and my fingers would just hurt like, okay. But now, you can't even tell. I have normal thumbs and fingers. So with that, that's all I have to report for episode 8 of season 9 alone. And I invite you to stay tuned because winter's coming. So I hope you like my YouTube page and we'll see you really soon. Ciao for now.